All right, so it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Jake Edwards, USL President, to the show today. Jake, welcome.
Great, thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
So before we get started, I've got to ask you, I know you're a Manchester boy like myself, so do you have a red or blue side of the city that you're from, or do you stay out of it?
There's only one team in Manchester, as we all know, yes. So I'm on the red side.
Yes. I'm so happy you said that. Now, this conversation is going to be so much better.
Yeah,
Great.
I have one uncle in the entire family who supports City, and nobody speaks to him much.
I was going to say you can't mention his name.
No.
That's great. So before we dive into, we've got a lot of different fans of the USL clubs listening to the show. So before we dive into the USL portion of things, if you could just give us a bit of background for people that don't know, just your own path to the USL and kind of how that came about. You've been with the USL for, I believe, about 7 years. So what's the path been like to get to the USL for you, and just some of your own background?
Yeah, I've been at USL 7 years now, and obviously a lot's changed since then, and we've accomplished a lot, and we'll talk about that on the show. It's been a great journey so far, from back in 2013 when I started. Prior to that, I had I had a playing career, as most people. I started playing football at 6 and retired at 34. And I had about an 11-year professional career in the UK and in England and Wales, and one season I played in the States for Charleston Battery. Then that was the A-League back in early 2000s. My connection obviously starts off in England, and with my family moving around the world with my father's job, we ended up in America, in New Jersey, during my high school years back in the very early 90s. And I played through that era of football in that part of the country, and it was a brilliant time. Played on some really well-known club teams at the time, Carney Thistle, which was a Scots-American club, and Union Lancers, German-American club. A lot of history, working men's clubs, different youth landscape in early 90s, late 80s. And it was the time of the World Cup 94, which I was a volunteer at in Giant Stadium, and the birth of MLS and the birth of the sort of modern leagues, I guess you'd say. So it was an exciting time. I went to university, James Madison University, played football there in mid-90s, and then in 98 I went to the UK, signed a contract with Wrexham, which was a team in North Wales, and at the time it was the old second division. And the teams, Manchester City, funnily enough, you mentioned, were in the second division then, as were Fulham and Stoke and a whole host of teams, and that was a great experience. And then I had a 11-year professional playing career that followed. And then after that, I in my later years of playing football, I would spend a lot of time on the business side of the club, spending time after training with the business teams, the marketing teams, just really getting an interest in that side of the business. It would always been my ambition to come back to the US after playing and get back in the game and try to affect some change and give back to the game in some way. And my experience playing in the Football League structure in England, over time, I started to feel strongly that's something I wanted to try and be part of building, that sort of divisional structure, pyramid structure in the US, and have a stable infrastructure underneath the top division. And so as I came to the end of my career, I was less interested in getting in the coaching side and more interested in the business side of the clubs I was at. I then needed a way to open the doors into the next phase of my career. So I went back to school, did an MBA full-time in the UK, and that opened my eyes to a lot of other areas of the business, learned a lot, met some great people. And through that, I ended up joining a company called Octagon. Octagon is a US sports marketing, sports sponsorship company that operates globally. It's one of the big players in the world. And I worked in their London office for a number of years and worked on some really interesting projects. And they were involved in the World Cup, and they were involved in Champions League sponsorships and advisory services to rights holders. And I spent a lot of time working with them, building business plans for launching new sports leagues in different parts of the world. And so that really got me excited about the opportunity potentially to come back to the US and start applying some of that learning. And it was by chance that I got to meet Alec and Rob, who own the USL, through a mutual friend who was also involved in Orlando City as one of the founders of Orlando City at the time. So back in 2012, as I moved back to the US, I was introduced, met with Alec and Rob, and just had a look at the league. In those days, we had about 10 clubs, one professional division, about 15 staff at the league office. And I spent a bit of time with Alec to think about a long-term strategic growth plan, how we would build this business, how we'd build this league, how we could grow this, and think about, expansion and stadium development and commercial and media and youth and all the components to where we are now and where we're going. And so that was a great opportunity, and it looks a lot different now than it did then. It was a little bit of a leap of faith as well. But I came on board then in 2013 as vice president, and then became president in 2015. Been here ever since. So it's been phenomenal what we've achieved so far, and it's just, for me, as I said, I started in the game at 6. I'm still involved at the game now at 40 something, and I'm very humbled to be part of all of this, and it's just an amazing time to be in the game right now.
Yeah, it's amazing to see the growth over the years, and the league is coming back this weekend. So before we dive into just a little bit more of the current state of the league, and can you tell us just a bit, for people that don't know too much about the USL, just the structure and kind of the way things are set up currently as far as the divisions and number of teams?
Yeah, so obviously people are familiar with the landscape, and some people are learning the landscape. And we have 3 professional men's divisions. First division is occupied by Major League Soccer. The second division is occupied by the USL, and that's our USL Championship, we call it. And then the third division below that, which we launched only last year, is called our USL League One. We have USL League Two beneath that, which is our preeminent amateur league. Over 80 teams, amateur teams, compete in that competition across the country. So an incredible footprint, over 100, nearly 130 clubs now in our 3 leagues across the US. And so we operate those properties. We have a youth infrastructure as well. We operate a USL Academy League, which is the first of its kind professional academy league that's affiliated with all of our League Two, League One, and Championship clubs. That's starting in earnest next season. And we have a youth property, Super Y League it's called. It's a summer league. And we've got a little over 11,000 kids playing in that summer league. So just a strong footprint that we have across the country. We have a league office based in Tampa, Florida, a little over 65 employees now at the league office, managing those leagues. So that's where we fit in the landscape here. The USL is one of the oldest and longest serving members of the US Soccer, of the federation. And so, we trace our roots back to mid 1980s, and it's evolved in one form or another. It's changed names and ultimately changed ownership. But the USL now, and has been for the last few years, the largest and fastest growing professional soccer organization in the US, and still growing.
And it's coming from a league that has multiple divisions. A hot topic in US soccer at the moment is promotion and relegation between divisions. Is that something that the USL is going to have in place? You coming from an English football background, obviously promotion and relegation is a very exciting part of, global football as well. It's not so prominent here in the US. Is that something that the USL is looking to add into their leagues as they grow and as things move along?
Yeah, I talked about this quite a bit. I think it is. It's something we feel certainly could add the additional dimension of excitement for the fans. We think it would be compelling for a number of reasons, and compelling for a number of constituencies. We think it'd be compelling TV, compelling for our partners, and certainly I think the fans would enjoy that. And I think it adds a level of intensity and excitement, and every game matters, right? And so there is many arguments for it. Of course, it's something we're looking at and have looked at, and will continue to do so. It's something we feel would make a difference. And now that we have a infrastructure with 2 divisions, it's something we can start to work on. And we need to build our League One and the infrastructure in League One and the expansion of League One a bit more. But right now, those plans have been sidelined a little bit. Those are ongoing plans. Something we will, I'm sure we will see in the future. But right now, it's just the focus is get back on the field, navigate this global pandemic that we're all dealing with. That is the priority right now, to navigate this season, get back on the field, and make sure we're in good shape for next year. So it's something we are and have been working on, but right now I'm afraid it's taken a bit of a sideline.
Yeah, totally understandable. And how has the league just at large handled the setbacks with COVID? And it's got to be a completely different animal trying to manage league and schedule and set fixtures up. So how has that been? Just trying to kind of rearrange and get things moving again, obviously safely, and getting the league back into motion.
Yeah, you got it right there. It's safety, it's health and safety first. How do we return to play? We started working on this in early March. We postponed the season in 12th of March thereabouts, and we set to it from then on. And every league around the world has had to work this out. And you're building the plane as you're flying it. There's no blueprint for this, and you're learning so much about the virus and transmission and how to mitigate risk. And we've had to come up with a really robust set of health and safety protocols, about a 60-page document. We've had to do all the work to put that together to make sure that we can mitigate as much risk as possible. You can't be risk-free in this world, but we've put a robust set of protocols together. And that's what we've been working on for the past three or 4 months now, is to work out if we were to get back on the field, how do you do that? And how do you do that in the safest possible way? And what was right for our league perhaps wouldn't have been right for a different league based on, size and scale and specific factors related to each league and how they could go about doing it. So we sat on a number of national task forces. The USL did alongside MLS and WSL US Soccer. So a sort of soccer specific national task force where the pro leagues and all the medical professionals were on that, sharing how we could address this, because we're going through a lot of the same issues. Mm-hmm. We worked with a number of the other sports leagues, NBA, MLB, to see how they were attacking the problem. And then we set up a number of task forces of our own. So we had our own medical task force with a number of experts from some of the top institutions in the US, and they helped guide and put a set of protocols together in terms of how we would manage the buildings, how we'd manage travel, how we'd manage the competition structure, and how we ultimately would manage the safety of the players and the testing of the players. And so we put a robust set of protocols together that was approved by our players union and by our owners of our clubs in both leagues. And that sort of paved the way for us to get back on the field. We had to first and foremost put those protocols together, and then we had to put a competition structure together that made sense. That for us, we needed to limit the amount of air travel significantly, and use the size and scale of the USL with 35 teams across the country. We were able to take a season where we moved away from a 2-conference structure and moved into a divisional structure of 8 divisions with 4 and 5 teams in each, and massively increased the amount of bus travel. So the majority of our games, the players will be on the buses now, and the coaches, and so we're able to mitigate risk. And there's going to be a few long bus journeys, unfortunately.
Back to basics for the players.
Back to basics a little bit. That's right. And it's just what's required at this point in time to get back on the field. Everyone's making sacrifices. The players have been fantastic to make those sacrifices, and the clubs and the owners have really leaned into this to invest in a time when there is uncertainty. We're a match day revenue league. Our clubs need the match day revenue, and in some states we're going to have 50% capacity. In some states we might have 1,000, 2,000 people in the building. In some states, some cities, we won't have anyone, no fans allowed, maybe initially. And so, there is, it does make me proud. I have to say it's been a hard road, but it makes me proud that the clubs and everyone behind the USL have really committed to doing this and really leaning into this to come out a stronger league for it.
Yeah, that's great that there is that sense of unity between the teams. Is there overlap too also with you working with the MLS clubs? I know they're coming back with a kind of a different variation of tournament in the coming days. Actually, I think it kicks off today. But has there been lots of communication between the two leagues, or a partnership in general, just at large, between the MLS and the USL?
Yeah, we have partnership. It's been a good partnership. Dates back to about 2013 in earnest. They've been good partners, and ultimately, you know, we're two independent leagues. You know, with the shared goal of driving awareness and growing the game, and ultimately, both leagues want to make this the number one sport in America. You know, at some point in the future, that's what we're working towards, and we keep collaborating on that. And so they've been good partners to work with. And as you know, teams are participating in the USL and Championship and League One. And yeah, we've worked together through this in many instances, not only because we have some MLS connected teams in our leagues, but you know, we're all dealing with the same issues, and we're attacking it in slightly different ways. And that's just based on um, several factors, but you know, for us, the size and scale of our league and the team's desire to be, you know, our teams are very community focused clubs, right? And so I think the opportunity to play in a hub, some other part of the country, was less appealing, and the fact that we could, with our size and scale, create a new divisional structure. I think that was appealing to our teams to make sure they can continue to play in their communities, ideally with fans, but if not with fans, just to feel like they're still in their communities playing, and they're in touch with their communities. That was important to our teams, and we built our program around that. MLS chose to go in a hub model, which we did explore, but they have a less number of teams, and you know, and it's as you say, it kicks off tonight. Unfortunately, they lost one team, Dallas, with some challenges around the testing and the infections, but they'll kick off tonight and they'll run their tournament there for a few weeks, as the NWSL did. So horses for courses, you know, it's just different. It's sort of different for each league how we've approached this. I don't think there's one right way. I think there's what's right for your league.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned that just the number of teams, and since you began from 10 and up until 35 teams now, what's been the league's model just as far as manageable growth goes, so that you do still have some of, with the teams and a lot of the clubs being relatively new, how do you manage the growth of league where you continue to grow, you add different markets, you add new clubs, but you also maintain the quality and also the organic growth around the clubs with supporter culture and just the general growth of the clubs at large?
Yeah, the growth has been just, I think, one of the great stories, I think, of the football landscape in the US over the last few years. And you know, last year we had 3 million fans come to the games. You know, I think we had, when I started, about 300,000 fans coming to games, and so to see the growth there and the expansion across the country. What it shows me is there's just such an appetite now for football. So many people consume it, watch it, play it, love it. Their kids are now watching it. The grandkids, you know, it's being passed down. This is a sport on the rise. We reach across all kinds of demographics. It's a sport that continually attracts the young supporters into it. Unlike some of the other sports that are having those challenges of attracting new fans. And so it's it's self-sustaining in that sense. There's access to football now around the world at any time. So supporters are very savvy, right? And they're following football all over the world. They understand what's good and what isn't. And ultimately, it's about creating that tribal connection with your local team. And that's what we're seeing now. It's not just an entertainment spectacle I might take my family to once or twice a year, and there is still a part of that, but really now it's become a part of people's lives, and that's an evolution that that perhaps wasn't here 10, 15 years ago. And so now it really matters to people's working week what happens to their team and how their team performs on the weekend, and that, you know, and bragging rights over derby matches and what have you. So it starts to mean a lot, and we see that in the supporter culture. We see that in the passion of the supporters, whether that's in Phoenix and the support groups there, and the I think one of the best atmospheres in the championship they've created there, or in Vegas or Madison, or any number of Louisville, any number of the cities we're in. It shows you that there is no tempering of that support. Part of the mission of USL is to bring professional soccer to communities that don't have access to their own team and don't have that touch point and can't build something of their own in their community. And having the ability to do that with a USL Championship club or a League One club ultimately just keeps continually building the support for the sport and helps us achieve the mission to make it the top sport or the number one sport. And every time we go into a community, it's just for me, I'll go in there, we'll do the work, and we'll announce a team, and there'll be a real sense of excitement and anticipation. And then you go back a year or so later for the opener, and there's 6, 7, 8, 10, 12,000 people there. And then you hand it over. That's their team, and they take it from there. And it's just a very that's different. That wasn't the same 10 or 15 years ago. And so I think there's a real sense of momentum now on that side. Now, couple that with all the investment people are making into stadiums and infrastructure to make it look and feel like a real proper environment. Think about the quality of players we now start to attract to the USL. Last year we had, I think it was a little over 60 full senior internationals in the league. We had 26 players playing on the first teams in the Gold Cup. We had African Cup of Nations appearances. We had World Cup qualifiers that USL players were in. Rest assured, in 2026, when the World Cup hits these shores, there's going to be USL players in that World Cup. And so quality on the field continues to increase. The stadium and the infrastructure we're playing in now, we've got about $1 billion invested as we speak in stadium projects. We've got 22 soccer stadiums we've built and some really impressive ones to go. You'll see a phenomenal stadium. You'll see a phenomenal stadium in Louisville this weekend opening up on the ESPN2 match. So all of that comes together. The exposure with ESPN and the media partnership that gives us just continues to elevate the status of the league, and all of those pieces help, and the supporters are really getting behind the clubs and seeing a quality football week in, week out.
Yeah, even since I've lived in the States, going from the first game I went to, which was an LA Galaxy game about just over a decade ago, the change in supporter culture that I've seen now, it's phenomenal to see. And the USL is a big part of that. Just from my own experience with Phoenix Rising, it's outstanding to see the growth. And as you mentioned, their tribal's a very interesting word, because a lot of American sports, maybe you go and watch a game and then you don't go for a few weeks. But this is starting to become, even in Phoenix, where I had the experience, people don't want to miss a game now, which that was never the case previously. So you mentioned also, just as far as youth development goes, how is the USL tying in with just youth development at large in the US? The landscape's changed slightly in the last few months, with some announcements coming that the DA was switching up. And so how is the USL involved in that, and kind of what's the path for younger players and your association with the youth clubs around the country?
Yeah, it's a long-term project for us. We started what we called the USL Academy Cup. That started last year. So really 18 months ago, we started a project where we wanted to get our clubs to start investing in and putting academies together. Now, it's a tricky landscape, obviously, with all of the youth clubs and youth infrastructure already in place across the country, and some big organizations doing great work. So we wanted to come up with a model that was complementary to what was already in the marketplace in the communities that our pro teams were playing in. We felt it was critical to create a platform that was focused on developing players to become professional players, rather than developing players to either look at college or to just be exposed to the sport. We wanted to think about the tip of the spear, and how do we identify those top quality players in the communities and give them a pathway through to their local USL professional club, and find a way to get to that level, be it League One or the Championship, or if they could go beyond that. But to do so in their market, so that, previously a player in Phoenix wouldn't have to go to Salt Lake, or, at 14 have to go to another part of the country with their parents. We wanted them to be able to go into a professional academy environment in their market. How do you do that in a cost-effective way, a sensible way that we can get all of our teams on board? At that point, there was no academy league, and there isn't an academy league just for the professional clubs to operate in conjunction with, though, the youth organizations. And so a lot of work went into this, and we started in 2019 with what we called the Academy Cup. And that was a regional-based event series where our USL Championship and League One teams and League Two teams could come and bring a youth team of their own into this kind of elite regional tournament. We did that in San Antonio and one in Tampa. And then ultimately there was going to be a national tournament this summer, which has been put on hold, obviously, with the virus situation. And that was going to evolve into a full-time academy league, which is where we are now. And we're going to kick off our full-time academy league in the spring of 21, and it's going to mirror the professional season. So starting in March, going to November, but have far more flexibility than what perhaps the development academy had in terms of where else players can play and the involvement they can have with their other youth club or the high school or so on and so forth. And that we took the position that we didn't want to have a blanket where it was every single age group covered. We wanted to put a single team together that was complementary, that those players could come into that program and go back as needed. But ultimately it was a one team, and that was, you sort of a 15 to 18, sort of U15 to U19, but that it was, if you're good enough, you're old enough, and so really we put some quotas on that. So if a certain number of players in each of those age groups to create one team, and that has been very successful in the Cup series that we had. And now we've got a great uptick, and we've got almost 130 clubs between League Two, League One, and the Championship. And some of those teams are already funding and operating their own academy. Some of them are evolving into building out their own academy, and some of them are affiliating with one or more large youth clubs, youth organizations in their community to work with them as well. To play under the banner of the pro team in a particular event, but also, have the ability to go and back with the youth club as well. So trying to build flexibility, and they can work in conjunction with those youth organizations to make sure that, no player is falling through the cracks, that everyone's got the opportunity, if they're good enough, to get that exposure and have a pathway through to the pro team. So that's something that's, it's not been done before. And of course, after we started this last year and came into this year, there was a big upheaval with the federation moving away from the DA program after so many years, and MLS were part of the DA program, and so they've obviously made an significant investment in their academies over the years, and they're trying to work out now a new model for what that looks like. And look, we're in a COVID world right now, so it's all a bit up in the air, I think, for some of this stuff. But for us, we are absolutely focused on the USL Academy League that's going to kick off in 2021. And right now, the teams and their affiliate organizations are going through the application process. We've set a whole bunch of academy standards, league standards for coaches, for facilities, etc., for entry and participation, and the clubs are now applying for that. So we've got good participation rates so far. So so keep an eye out that next March. I think that'll be, we're very excited about it. It's going to be a bit of a game changer, I think, and it's going to be great for all of our clubs. And you'll see, and you can see now, many of our clubs are starting to sign players from their academies. Phoenix is a good example. It has done, and a number of our teams are doing that as well. So they're seeing the benefits from having that academy and having that pathway in place.
And just quickly, just on the youth soccer piece, do you see the traditional model of players going through this college draft system that's been in place in the US for a long time? Do you see that going away with development teams in place and academies such as the US are having, where if players are good enough, they're old enough, sort of how it is in the rest of the world? Do you see that kind of a cultural shift happening in the US?
I can't speak. I mean, we don't do a draft. We don't do a college draft. MLS have done it for a number of years. I get the sense they're moving away from it. You've seen some changes they've made this season. Um, and I think the gap is widening now for players coming out of college to go into either the championship or MLS and go straight into the first team and start. It used to be that all the best players in America went into college
Right.
and then got drafted out. That's not really the case now. There's still some quality programs and quality players coming out of college, that's for sure. But more often now, players are coming through academies. At the MLS level and starting to see that now at the championship level. So we don't have a draft. We don't have we're structured differently than the MLS. We don't have this allocation method where everyone gets an equal chance at college players, for example. So in USL, the teams recruit their players as they see fit from wherever they see fit. League doesn't play a role in player recruitment. That's down to the teams. So if they're recruiting players from college, they're doing that on their own, not through any mechanism we have, and we don't have any plans to have such a mechanism. So for the future of the draft, I'm not sure. We're not involved anyway, so to speak. Whether MLS sticks with it or not, I doubt long term that they do.
And before we let you go, with just a final question, I don't know how much truth there is in this, but I found it really fascinating. We can just do a quick fire answer to this. Is the USL going to get a Champions League spot for the region? Is that true? Could the only second division, second tier in the world that would have a Champions League spot in the region?
Well, it's precedent is against us. Obviously, as you say, it's only for first divisions, but we have the Champions League here, and we also have the CONCACAF League. The Champions League is really determined, I think, by US soccer and the allocation of spots for that. And the CONCACAF League is determined by the membership of CONCACAF, and two different tournaments. It's something that we've broached with CONCACAF, and I know there are some challenges to it. As we sit here, though, I think there's strong merit for it. I would say arguably the USL Championship after MLS and Liga MX is potentially the third largest league in the CONCACAF region in terms of the size and scale. We've got now 18 cities in the top 50 DMAs in the US. We've got 22 soccer-specific stadiums we've built with $1 billion invested into new stadium projects. As I said, we've got over 60 senior internationals last season, 26 guys that were playing in the CONCACAF Gold Cup. We've got the USL is the largest provider of football content to ESPN globally. We've got 3 million fans coming to our games. We've got fantastic football markets, community cities that really, I think, could do a lot to promote the brand of CONCACAF and those tournaments. And so outside of the Gold Cup event, which is arguably the only time that people interact with the CONCACAF brand, and the Champions League, I think or the CONCACAF League would be a great showcase for the CONCACAF and its competitions in the US and in the markets we're in. And our teams would do a fantastic job in that tournament. And I think it would be, as I said, precedence is against us on the Champions League side, but it's a conversation that's ongoing. And I think, I think there's merit to the consideration of it.
Yeah, definitely. That'll be fascinating to see. And listen, Jay, we'll let you go. We've got, I'm sure, a lot to do to get the league kicked off this weekend, but we appreciate you taking the time out and coming on the show. And just for anyone following along, where can they follow you on Twitter and social media?
Of course you can, yeah. As long as you don't hammer me too much, but you're...
I'm sure football fans only say nice things to you, mate.
Yeah, you can follow me, but certainly follow the action this weekend. And please do tune in and watch the games on ESPN Deportes and ESPN2. And we've got 8 national TV games in 11 days on ESPN2, kicking off Sunday night and the primetime window. So you're going to see a real showcase. Many of our teams are going to be playing. So it's an exciting way to return to action this weekend. So thanks again, Adam. Appreciate you having me on the show, and congratulations on all the great work you're doing down there. And I'd like to